views expressed on this program are not necessarily those of WTJX, its board, staff, or underwriters.
Good day. You are listening to Ability Radio. I'm one of your hosts, Kishma B. Francis of the Disability Rights Center of the Virgin Islands, and I am joined today by my co-host, Jasmine Barmer. Jasmine, if you could just tell our listening audience a little about yourself and tell us about your work with students.
Sure thing. So, as Kishma said, my name is Jasmine Barmer. I also work at the Disability Rights Center of the Virgin Islands. And before I went to law school, I taught 5th and 6th grade in New York and abroad over in China. As a teacher, I work closely with students in and outside of the classroom, supporting their academic and overall development.
So, our topic today, we're going to talk about guardianship versus self-determination. So, we normally get a lot of calls requesting assistance with guardianships from parents and or legal guardians because they have a student that is in special education, receiving special education services, and this student, at the time when they reach 18, they become emancipated. However, even though they're emancipated, they're considered an adult, some of these students cannot handle their own affairs. So a lot of parents have been coming to us asking about guardianship and the process. So we just wanted to do a show about it. So guardianship is basically a court process where you have someone petitions to be a guardian over a person that may be deemed to be incompetent or incapacitated. So this person is unable to take care of their own affairs legally, financially, educationally. So they will need assistance. And what the guardian is going to do is they're going to step in to their shoes and take care of everything. So the process is like this. Say a parent comes into our office, they request assistance with petitioning for guardianship. When they request assistance for petitioning for guardianship, they bring in information as far as the student's birth paper, a letter from a service provider or medical provider stating that this child or young adult at the time is unable to take care of his or her affairs, and guardianship is highly recommended. What happens after that is we start to draft up the petition. And when we draft up this petition, we want to know besides the letter from the service provider or the doctor, we want to know if this service provider or doctor is able to testify on behalf of you. So when the parent comes in, their representation is done by DRCBI, and we represent them for free. However, they have to pay all associated costs. If they have a doctor that's a witness, the doctor who is the witness, the expert witness at the trial, the parent has to make plans to pay and arrange for that doctor to come. We don't do that. We can't afford it. We're a nonprofit. Once the paperwork goes through, the court, before a guardianship is granted, the court reviews the petition and a court date is set. When a court date is set, the student, who is the ward, who at that time must be 18 or older, because by then they will become an adult under VI law, they're provided with an attorney. The court normally appoints an attorney. The parent, once that the case is over, etc., they make arrangements as far as payment for the attorney. What the court also does is they hire someone to do home visit. And this visitor creates a very robust report. I've seen one visitor where this visitor visited the home. They visit the school to find out about the student, and they even talk to the parents. So when we talk about the process, there's a lot of money involved. So it takes a while. It takes a long time because, as we have seen, the courts have been, moving through and scheduling. However, there are some cases we're still waiting to be scheduled. But let me just tell you, if the student is capable of taking care of his or her affairs, the court may grant limited guardianship or the court might not grant guardianship. Keep in mind, having guardianship over someone is taking away their right to make decisions on their own behalf. So when it comes to qualifications, I normally not the one to sit there and say who qualifies, but I know if I see a student, when the parent comes in and they say, yeah, I need guardianship over my child, because my child is 18 and special education sent me over here, and I sit down and I talk to this child, and I deem that this child, based on my experience, is capable of taking care of their own finances, making their own choices. I give the parents options. And these options noted under self-determination. And Jasmine is going to talk more about that in a second. So let me just finish up the process for guardianship. We go to court. The court date is set. You go to court. It's a hearing. The judge is there to determine whether or not this person is incapacitated. When the judge speaks to the ward, which is the adult whose right is going to be taken away. And the judge also asks follow-up questions after both sides have rest for the petitioner or petitioners seeking guardianship. Now, keep in mind, there might be more than one petitioner. So it might be mother and a father. There might be a mother, son. There might be a son or a daughter. It all depends on the age of the individual, okay? Sister, brother. It all depends on the age of the individual. Keep in mind, if you are petitioning for guardianship over, say, your child that's 18 years or older, it is best, highly recommended, that you inform the other parent, because the judge is going to want to know how that person feels about you petitioning for guardianship as a parent. Even if you're siblings and you're petitioning for guardianship over your parent, the judge is going to want to know how your other siblings feel. So our office, what we do is we write a letter, and the letter normally states that this is what's going to happen. This is what we perceive to happen. We sent in a sample of the petition to the say it's a parent, the other parent, and a waiver of no objection. If you don't object, just sign it, have it notarized, send it back to us so we could file it with the court. But we sent this document. We either have them served via process server or we sent it via the mail so we can show that it was sent to the individual. Once we go through the hearing, and let's say there's no objection from the other parent, and we go through the hearing and the court grants unlimited guardianship, there will be instructions from the judge in the order as far as what needs to happen within a certain time, and all of that stuff. So that's just a quick, robust overview of guardianship and the process. So now let's talk about self-determination, because like I said, I've seen a lot of students, young adults that do not qualify for guardianship. So Jasmine, what is self-determination?
So, at base level, self determination is really about giving young people, specifically young people with disabilities, the ability to make their own choices and have control over their lives. It's ultimately the idea that with the right support, people can direct their own future, their own lives, instead of having choices made entirely for them. From a legal standpoint, it's ultimately about saving or preserving their independence while still putting support in place where needed. So the person can live fully and as much as on their own as possible. I mean, it also recognizes that everyone deserves a voice in decisions that impact their lives, whether that's education, healthcare, where to live, what to do, and that support, should enhance their voice and not actually replace it.
Yes, self-determination is very important because what we're looking at is making sure that a student who has a disability, they they're able to function independently, sometimes independently with with assistance. So what are the options, Jasmine, when it comes to self-determination?
So there's a few different options when it comes to supporting someone's decision making, and it's not like one size fits all approach because each individual requires something different, right? So on the least restrictive end, there's supported decision making where trusted people are chosen to help you understand and make decisions without giving up your rights. There are other tools. You could do powers of attorney where someone can assist with specific areas, like be that finances, be that healthcare, depending on what that specific person needs. And then, as you've already spoken about it, and sometimes guardianship does fall under self determination, but that's again the more restrictive end where the court determines, okay, maybe this person isn't able to make these specific decisions for themselves and it would be better, or the court determines that it would be better that someone else does it. Really, the goal is to find the option that provides the right level of support while preserving that person's independence as much as possible, and to tailor that support to the individual rather than defaulting to the most restrictive option which would be guardianship.
Yes, and when it comes to power of attorneys, like Jasmine mentioned, I that's one of the options I try to steer the parents towards, especially if the student is going into college. I'm like, do you want to consider an educational power of attorney to assist the student while they're in college because they're emancipated? So, therefore, the college does not have to speak to you. They might do it as a courtesy, but they do not have to speak to you. They have to speak with the student who is a student at the university. Do you want to have financial power of attorney where you can assist the student with banking, assist the student with financial affairs? So I go over those options with the parents because even though guardianship might seem like an ideal way for parents who have students with disabilities and they don't think they are capable, the student is capable of taking care of their own affairs, it's taken away their rights. It's taken away their rights. But I want to say this, even though a guardianship was granted, it's not forever. It is not forever. So a student, individual, I say students because we get a lot of students coming in with their parents at 18 to petition for guardianship. So even though this individual was deemed at that time to need that additional support by the court, they can petition for the guardianship to be relinquished. They can. There'll have to be another testimony by the doctor, etc., because this is an order. It's a court decision. So you'll just have to go back to court and just to be removed from the guardianship. So when we talk about self-determination, Jasmine, when should parents have this conversation with their child, with their support system, and with the community?
So I think this is a conversation that should happen earlier than most people think. Ideally, parents are talking to their children long before they turn 18. So I'd say maybe as they enter or you'd see how they develop throughout their teenage years, you as a parent, you gauge when it's appropriate, but waiting until a month before they turn 18 isn't ideal. I think giving it more time gives your family, your community, your support system time to explore different options, involve the young person in the decision-making process, and to really think about what level of support makes sense for that person. And I think starting early also allows students to begin building self-advocacy skills over time. You are involving them in a process that teaches them to speak up for themselves, that teaches them what they should be doing for themselves, instead of being expected to figure it all out at once at 18, which unfortunately ends up happening to a lot of people. I think that it also helps avoid making rushed or last-minute decisions when your child legally becomes an adult, which again is when most of these issues come up. So I think the earlier the conversation starts, the more thoughtful and individualized the plan can be.
Yes, I agree with you. I agree with you, Jasmine, because when the student is transitioning in the IEP, there's always a transition plan when the student is going from middle school to high school, sometimes from elementary to middle school.
Mhm.
And I think that conversation needs to start at that point because your student, your child, you shouldn't wait till last minute to come and try to figure out guardianship. And what I've been noticing also is when they sit down in an IEP meeting and the IEP team is telling them, oh, you need to go and talk to the disability rights about guardianship because when they're 18, we can't talk to you and you're not allowed in the meeting and all of that stuff. And some of it is true. But if the child is fully capable of allowing his or her parent to come into the IEP meeting at the age of 18, all they have to say is, I want my mama in this meeting. That's all they have to say because they can invite anyone to that meeting. However, I also think the parents need to be more engaged in the process, especially if the student has an IEP plan, so they can see what their transition goals look like. And when you look at the transition goals, you can measure that student's success. When you measure the student's success over a period of time, you can see whether or not self-determination should be an option or guardianship might be on the table. So, Jasmine,
Yes,
what
ma'am.
do you think parents should do when it comes to advocating for their child?
Mm. So I think the first step in advocating for your child, sitting down and understanding what is it that you as a parent know that your child needs. And that doesn't have to be the perfect education word or legal word or anything like that. What do you as a parent think your child needs? And I think after you determine that, you begin speaking to their schools, speaking to your community partners, getting partnered with organizations similar to ours that can kind of guide you toward answers or answer any questions that you may have in determining what it is, in determining what steps are required to help you get what you believe your child needs as a support. And even before that, like I said, talk to your children's school. That's really your first start. And if you feel as though that is not that is not a good start, you just move on to the next step. You talk to the people in the community, you talk to different organizations, and you continue to get answers and fight for whatever it is your child needs.
Yes, definitely. And also, I would add to that, just listen to your child.
Mhm, mhm.
Your child knows what they want, what they need, and they know what their interests are. And whatever their interests are, do not steer them away from it because you feel that they have certain limitations. There are services that are out there to assist individuals with adjusting or accommodations to what their interests are. So listen to your child. Listen to your child. And when I say listen, just really understand where they're coming from, understand what they want, what they need, and be that child's cheerleader, that young adult's cheerleader, that grown person's cheerleader. And understand that the limits you might be placing on your child, they might be unrealistic because your child may be able to do more than you expect. So, Jasmine, as a teacher, when you think about as a former teacher, when you think about self determination, how important is it in a child's life?
I think it's extremely important, and honestly, I wish that this is one of those moments that makes me wish that I would have taught high school so I could have actually seen the development and the end result of self-determination and that advocacy for yourself, or for themselves. But I think that just thinking of students that I have who or that I taught who, have disabilities, knowing that they are still able to make decisions for themselves, knowing that they were taught and fully understand that they are able under the law to make those decisions for themselves, and their community, their parents, their school, what have you, supporting that, I think just helps to make a better person out in our communities.
Yes, and I agree with you. I agree with you. They are protected under the law. Now, when I think about self-determination and I think about a student being able to make their own choice, it brings me back to this group under the NEPAT. We're under our Training Information Center. We're under larger organization and it's called NEPAT. And there's this one organization called REAL. I don't remember what it stands for, but it's just youth that are empowered to make decisions on their behalf. They teach them about self-determination, and these youths actually leaders within different organizations. And it gives them a sense of empowerment. Not a sense, it empowers them. It really does empower them. So, Jasmine, before we wrap up, any last words?
I guess my last words would be, just emphasizing everything we've said here. You know your child knows themselves. And the earlier you start these conversations, the more time you have to figure out what is the best means and method to support them. So just always take those things into account when making those decisions.
And what I really want the listening audience to understand is that we're not trying to talk you out of guardianship. No. We really just want you to know that there are different avenues, and self determination allows the individual to make choices as far as who they want to live with, where they want to live. They want to, you know, go to this school. Okay, they can go to this school. Guardianship, however, it limits them. It limits them because the guardian takes control to the point that they have to do annual accounting over their finances, all of that stuff. So if you haven't gathered anything from this show, all I want you to know is these students, these individuals have a voice. Listen to them, because in the end, they know what they want, they know what they need, and they know how to get there. It's up to you to provide them with the tools, and you can reach out to agencies like ourselves. Disability Rights Center of the Virgin Islands, the Independent Living Center, Family Resource Center, just to name a few. But Jasmine, thank you. Thank you for being my co-host today. And Disability Rights Center is brought to you. So our Ability Radio actually is brought to you by the Disability Rights Center of the Virgin Islands. We have 2 locations, one in St. Croix and one in St. Thomas. Our phone number is 340-776-4303. I hope you enjoyed our show. Have a great day.
The views expressed on this program are not necessarily those of WTJX, its board, staff, or underwriters.